Alright, so today I'll be talking about overharvesting and conservation planning in the Philippines. Um, so even though overharvesting is a really big issue on land as well, I'm going to be focusing more on the fish and seafood side of it, just because there's so many islands. It's really important to remember how important fish are in this area. Not to mention it's part of the Coral Triangle, which I talked about in a previous presentation. So since the Philippines is made up of over 7,000 islands, that's a pretty significant amount of coastal areas and sea. So seafood makes up over half of their diet. It's found in most of their dishes. So it's just something important to keep in mind when thinking about over harvesting and how they use their waters. So 75% of the fishing grounds in the Philippines are victims of overharvesting. A lot of this harvesting comes from commercial fishermen, but also local fishing as well. Um, since the two are so different, it's really difficult to kind of control them and make different rules for everybody. But since fish are so important to the economy, a healthy marine ecosystem is pretty vital, so they all take it pretty seriously. And the Philippines is one of the biggest seafood producing countries in the world. I think it's third or something. And then they're responsible for a fourth of the total fish production and third for seaweed, which is a fun little fact there. Any canned tuna that you probably buy comes from the Philippines. A lot of that tuna is wild caught, so who knows what fishing methods they use. There's some good tuna you can get though. There's like a website that tells you. Um, Although in 2010, the fishing industry in the Philippines employed over 1.5 million people, which is pretty cool. But it's just another reason why overharvesting is such an um, important subject because, if all the fish are gone, then they're not going to have jobs anymore. So now I'll just talk a little bit about some of the species that are most vulnerable to overharvesting. Um, so for commercial purposes, the yellowfin tuna is probably the most significant. This is a gigantic predatory fish. They hunt sardines, anchovies, other smaller animals and fish. And then they're also the subject of commercial fishing, local fishing, tourism, a lot of that stuff. Um, and then the Indian sardine. So this one's kind of cool. It's a small, oily, really nutritious fish. It's pretty high in like B vitamins and oils and all that good stuff. So like any like ocean documentary you've seen probably has swarms of sardines that are being hunted by other animals. Um, they have a really high biomass, and so they're super important for the ocean. Um, and they're also easy to fish for since they do travel in swarms, so you can catch them pretty easily. Skipjack is another species of tuna. It's a little bit smaller and it has pretty cool stripes on it. And then the round scad, which I believe is a type of tuna, but I forgot. So all of these fish are really significant in the fishing industry. They're caught for canning, production of like omega vitamins and fish oils and things like that. Um, and then the reason that this is important is because a lot of the overfishing that occurs can cause cascading effects in the coral triangle, um, especially in tuna. So because they're a predatory fish, they are responsible for controlling a lot of the ecosystem and the smaller species of fish as well. And then they're also a food source for bigger species like dolphins, sharks, even some toothed whales. Um, there's a lovely picture of a tuna shoving his face in a swarm of sardines. So fishing methods often include bycatch over other keystone species. So a lot of the fishing that happens in the Philippines is illegal and not super sustainable, like different nets and hooks, and a lot of stuff that gets caught on it includes like whales, sharks, sea turtles, stingrays, a lot of other really important species. Um, Estimates in the early 2000s, between 8 and 25% of global catch is discarded, so this even includes other species of fish that weren't being fished for. Perfectly good fish that just gets killed and thrown back into the ocean. And then turtles, seabirds, all that stuff as well. So destruction like this can cause an ecosystem collapse, which is the cascading effect within reefs that affect surrounding areas. So such a significant loss of certain species can really affect the ecosystem around them and then cause everything to stop working correctly. So some of the conservation efforts that are that are happening right now at the species level. So since tuna are so important to local and international fishing industries, um, it consists of both individual fishers and commercial fisheries. So like I was saying earlier, it makes certain rules inefficient and difficult to promote because, the rules that you make for commercial fishermen won't always affect locals and then vice versa. Um, so there's actually quite a few projects underway. One of them's by the World Wildlife Fund, and then also local Filipinos and their government are making a significant um, effort to help reduce bycatch and fish more sustainably. One of the ways that the government is helping is the locals are actually being taught how to use single hook methods to catch adult mature tuna. Um, and then they're also being taught more efficient ways to store them on the boat so that they can stay high quality, fresh, and then that way they do more of a quality over quantity situation. They're also working on regulating IUU, which stands for Illegal, Unreported, and Unregulated Fishing. They provide funding and empowerment to registered fishers. Um, so they provide a lot of resources to local fishermen who are trying to support businesses or working for other fisheries. And then they're also kind of being more hard on those who are unregistered and fishing illegally. Um, Actually, there's one guy who I was reading about, and a lot of it is at the industry level. So because all the fish are disappearing and they're having such a hard time with it, a lot of the local fishermen are not being given any resources. They're even being told to fish out of bounds and in illegal areas. And then when they get in trouble, their bosses don't really care. So a lot of those rules that affect both international and then local fishermen are super important, um, so that everybody can kind of be on the same page. And then for the area level, another super important marine resource are the mangroves. Not only do these provide an important buffer zone from typhoons, but they're also an important breeding ground for a lot of fish and crustaceans. Um, and then, as you can see by this map here, there's actually quite a few mangroves around the Philippines, especially in these smaller islands in the middle. All of these are such a really important buffer zone. I mean, the Philippines get tsunamis, typhoons, all that crazy stuff. So, the mangroves are super important to help protect their settlements and small coastal towns. Um, but unfortunately, over 50% of the mangrove forests are gone, cut down, cleared, which is crazy to me. And then, so one thing cool that the government is doing is they're giving communities resources for replanting and restoring. So a lot of these mangroves are actually being regrown. You can see in the background of that picture there's little baby mangrove trees. So that's going to improve overall protection and then increase biodiversity of those areas again, which will in turn help a lot of the um, fishing populations out in the ocean. Yeah, so see, I got my sources here.